Take a deep breath. Now imagine the entire planet doing the same, but with water instead of air. For millennia, our world's oceans have been breathing, driven by a colossal engine of currents that circles the globe, carrying warmth to the poles and life-giving nutrients from the abyss to the sunlit shallows. This is the ocean as we know it. A vibrant, dynamic system, a cradle of life so vast it dwarfs our own existence. It is a world of constant motion, where every drop of water is connected in an intricate dance that dictates weather, climate, and the very distribution of life on Earth. But what happens when that dance begins to slow, when the planet's great liquid heart starts to falter? At the center of this global circulatory system is a current known as the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. Think of it as the ocean's primary artery, a massive conveyor belt moving warm tropical waters northward, where they release their heat into the atmosphere, warming entire continents. As the water cools, it becomes saltier and denser, sinking into the crushing darkness of the deep and beginning its long, slow journey back south. This process has remained stable for thousands of years, a predictable planetary rhythm we have built our world around. It is a silent, invisible force of nature that has guaranteed our climate's relative stability. But we've been ignoring a quiet alarm, a faint tremor in the system that's growing louder with each passing year. The alarm isn't a siren. It's the sound of melting ice. As our planet warms at an unprecedented rate, colossal glaciers and ice sheets are pouring unfathomable volumes of fresh water into the North Atlantic. This isn't just water. It's a poison to the AMOC engine. It dilutes the very saltiness that allows the cooling water to sink, effectively jamming the gears of the entire system. For decades, the ocean has absorbed this shock, but every system has a breaking point. We are now closer to that point than ever before, standing on the precipice of a change so profound it will rewrite the rules of life on this planet, starting with the heart of the ocean itself. And then, one day, it happens. It doesn't happen with a bang, but with an unnerving, planet-wide silence. The great current slows, stutters, and finally stagnates. This is the beginning of what future oceanographers might call the Great Stagnation. The ocean's heart has not stopped, but it has weakened into a faint, barely perceptible flutter. On the surface, the initial changes are subtle, almost peaceful. The waves still crash. The sun still glints off the azure surface, but underneath, a creeping paralysis has set in. The vital exchange between the surface and the deep has ceased, trapping nutrients in the abyss and leaving the sunlit layers to starve. The consequences of this stagnation are as invisible as they are terrifying. Without the constant churn of the currents, oxygen from the surface is no longer mixed into the deeper waters. The ocean, once teeming with life, begins to suffocate from the inside out. Vast swathes of the water column become anoxic, turning into immense, globe-spanning dead zones where almost nothing complex can survive. The vibrant coral reefs, the bustling schools of fish, the majestic whales, all vanish, their remains sinking into an oxygen-starved graveyard from which they will never be returned to the cycle of life. A chilling stillness descends upon the once thriving ecosystems, a silence more profound than any desert. In the eerie twilight zones below the surface, a new and profoundly unsettling phenomenon emerges: the ghost meadows. Imagine vast underwater plains once covered in lush seagrass, swaying gently in the now vanished currents. Today, they still stand, perfectly preserved in the anoxic water. The lack of oxygen has halted all bacterial decay, creating an underwater museum of death. The blades of grass are still green, the intricate root systems are still intact, and they sway in the faint tidal movements like a ghostly memory of a world that has passed. It's a forest of zombies, a landscape caught between life and decay, beautiful yet utterly devoid of life. Venturing into a ghost meadow would be a surreal and horrifying experience. There are no fish darting between the blades, no crustaceans scurrying in the sediment, no sounds of life at all. The silence is absolute, broken only by the sound of your own breathing. The water is crystal clear, yet it feels heavy, oppressive, like the air in a sealed tomb. You might see the preserved shapes of fish or crabs half buried in the silt, their bodies untouched by scavengers because there are none. It's a pristine and horrifying monument to an ecological catastrophe, a silent testament to the moment the oceans stopped breathing. As the old rulers of the ocean fade into these preserved graveyards, a new power begins to stir. In the oxygen-starved mud and the suffocating sludge at the bottom of these dead zones, something ancient is waking up. These are realms where the rules of modern biology no longer apply, where life doesn't need oxygen to thrive. This new world belongs to the anaerobes, the extremophiles, the primitive life forms that have been patiently waiting in the dark for millions of years. The death of the old world has created the perfect cradle for a new, and far stranger, one to be born. The silence is about to be broken, not by the familiar sounds of life, but by the rise of the slime. The ocean's great stagnation has set the stage, and now the stage is being claimed by something ancient, something patient, something that has been waiting in the wings for its moment in the sun. With the currents dead and the waters warming, the conditions are perfect for a hostile takeover. This is not a conquest by any grand predator or intelligent species. This is the rise of the simplest, most primitive forms of life on Earth, the algae. But these are not the delicate phytoplankton that form the base of the healthy ocean food web. These are the toxic ones, the opportunists, the survivors that thrive where nothing else can. They have been lurking in small pockets for millennia, waiting for the moment when the planet's protective systems would fail. That moment has arrived. Algae are essentially the ocean's weeds, and like any weed, they flourish when conditions are degraded. In a healthy ocean, nutrients are distributed evenly, predators keep populations in check, and competition limits any one species from dominating. But in our new, stagnant world, all those checks and balances have collapsed. Agricultural runoff filled with nitrogen and phosphorus pours unchecked into coastal waters, while warming temperatures accelerate algal metabolism to unprecedented rates. The increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere dissolves into the water, feeding the algae even more efficiently. It's a perfect storm of conditions, a banquet laid out for the most aggressive, fast-growing species. And they are feasting. Within years, what were once isolated red tides and seasonal blooms have merged into a single planet-spanning phenomenon. The ocean's surface begins to change color, and it's not subtle. Vast stretches of water that were once deep blue or turquoise are now neon green, blood red, or even a sickly orange. The water thickens, taking on a viscous, almost oily quality. If you were to dip your hand into it, it would come out coated in a slime that clings to your skin, staining it with the unnatural hues of the bloom. This is not paint, it's not pollution in the traditional sense. It's life, but life so concentrated and so aggressive that it has become a poison. The algae produce toxins as a byproduct of their metabolism, chemicals designed to ward off grazers and competitors. In normal conditions, these toxins are diluted and broken down by the ocean's vast volume and active bacterial communities. But in the new ocean, the toxins accumulate. They saturate the water, making it unsafe not just to drink, but even to touch. Fish that venture into these zones die within hours, their gills clogged, their blood poisoned. Birds that feed on the contaminated fish succumb to paralysis and convulsions. The blooms spread like a living infection, consuming every drop of available nutrients and leaving nothing for anyone else. This is ecological warfare at its most fundamental level. But the true horror of the algal takeover is not the surface. It's what happens below. The bloom layer can grow to be meters thick, a living blanket that floats on the water's surface and blocks out the sun. Scientists would come to call this phenomenon the suffocating blanket. Imagine diving beneath this layer. The transition is abrupt and terrifying. One moment you are surrounded by the bright, colorful chaos of the bloom, and the next, you plunge into absolute darkness. The light simply cannot penetrate through the dense mass of cells above. It's not a twilight zone. It's pitch black at just 10 meters depth, even at high noon on a cloudless day. In this lightless world beneath the blanket, the water takes on qualities that no natural ocean should possess. The temperature is unnaturally warm, heated by the sun-baked bloom layer above, but unable to release that heat to the depths. The pH has dropped dramatically, turning the water acidic as the algae respire, and the lack of photosynthesis prevents oxygen production. This is a place where the fundamental chemistry of the ocean has been rewritten. Any creature that finds itself trapped beneath this layer is in a death chamber. The darkness prevents any escape by sight, the warmth saps energy, and the acidic water begins to dissolve shells, corrode scales, and burn exposed tissue. The few brave explorers who have ventured into these zones report scenes of almost incomprehensible devastation. The seafloor beneath the suffocating blanket is carpeted with the remains of what was once a thriving ecosystem. But these are not bones or shells, those have been dissolved by the acidic water. Instead, there are only faint impressions in the sediment, ghost shapes where life once existed. Occasionally, a more resistant structure survives. The beak of a squid, the tooth of a shark, the silica skeleton of a sponge. These are the only epitaphs in an underwater cemetery that stretches for thousands of kilometers. Above, the surface shimmers with deceptive beauty, a riot of color that promises vitality but delivers only death. The suffocating blanket represents a fundamental shift in the ocean's energy economy. For billions of years, the ocean's food web has been powered by photosynthesis in the sunlit shallows, with energy and nutrients flowing down to the depths. But now that flow has been cut off. The deep ocean is isolated, starving, and dark. Any plant or algae that once relied on even the faint light of the deep ocean twilight zone is now faced with an impossible choice: adapt to life without light or die. And here, at the edge of extinction, evolution begins to take strange and terrifying paths. The old rules of plant life, sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, are no longer sufficient. To survive in this new, hostile world, the ocean's flora will have to do something unprecedented. They will have to learn to hunt. Meet the viper kelp. It doesn't look like the swaying, golden forests of the past. It is pale, almost translucent, having lost its chlorophyll in the eternal night. Its fronds are no longer broad leaves designed to catch sunlight. They are thin, sensitive tendrils that drift in the stagnant water like the hair of a drowned giant. They are covered in microscopic sensory hairs that can detect the faintest vibration. A struggling fish, a drifting crab, even the heartbeat of a dying whale. This is no longer a plant reaching for the light. It is a predator reaching for a meal. The mechanism of the viper kelp is a marvel of biological horror. It doesn't have muscles in the way we understand them, but it uses rapid hydraulic pressure changes to move with shocking speed. When a potential meal brushes against a trigger hair, the kelp reacts instantly. The fronds snap shut, coiling around the victim like a python. But it's not just the grip that kills. The surface of the kelp is coated in a sticky, paralytic neurotoxin secreted from specialized glands. The moment skin touches plant, the prey is stunned, silenced before it can even thrash. Imagine being a fish in this new ocean. You are blind, navigating by touch and pressure in the absolute dark. You are starving, scavenging for scraps falling from the toxic surface. You feel something brush against your flank, soft, almost gentle. You pause, sensing no danger, no predator's heartbeat. And then the water erupts. You are seized by a dozen icy fingers. A cold numbness spreads from your scales to your gills. You can't move, can't breathe, can't scream. You are held fast in the embrace of a forest that is slowly, patiently digesting you alive. The digestion process is slow and silent. The viper kelp doesn't have a mouth. It absorbs. Once the prey is paralyzed, the fronds secrete powerful enzymes that break down flesh, bone, and scale into a nutrient-rich soup. This soup is then absorbed directly through the plant's skin. A single catch can sustain a viper kelp for months in the famine-stricken deep. In these forests, you might see the ghostly, half-dissolved remains of fish suspended in the fronds, glowing faintly from the bioluminescent bacteria that aid in the digestion. It is a gallery of the dead, held in the arms of the living. But there is a deeper mystery here. Scientists studying these specimens have noticed something unsettling. The viper kelp seems to communicate. When one plant captures prey, chemical signals pulse through the water to its neighbors. The surrounding forest begins to move, their tendrils reaching out, anticipating more prey. It's a coordinated response, a hive mind of hunger. Are they just reacting to chemical stimuli, or has the darkness birthed a rudimentary form of plant intelligence? In the silence of the deep, the forest is not just watching. It might be thinking. These carnivorous forests now dominate the midwater zones, creating a barrier of death for any creature trying to migrate between the depths and the surface. They are the new apex predators of the twilight zone, a wall of hungry mouths waiting in the dark. But even the viper kelp has its limits. As we descend further, into the crushing pressure and searing heat of the tectonic rifts, the water becomes too toxic, too volatile for even these monsters to survive. Here, near the bleeding edge of the planet's crust, the flora has taken an even stranger path. Down here, where the earth cracks open and bleeds fire into the ocean, the water is a boiling cauldron of acid and sulfur. The meat-eaters cannot live here. Their tissues would dissolve. Their toxins would denature. In this hellscape, biology has fused with geology. The plants of the abyss have stopped trying to be soft and organic. To survive the acid and the heat, they have armored themselves. They have become something that looks less like life and more like the crystal heart of the planet itself. Far below the reach of the hungry kelp, in the deepest scars of the planet's crust, lies a world that would kill a human in a heartbeat. Here, at the bottom of the tectonic trenches, the side effects of our changing climate have triggered a geological chain reaction. The shifting weight of melting ice caps and rising sea levels has destabilized the Earth's crust, prying open new fissures and awakening dormant volcanic ranges. The water here is a chemical witch's brew, superheated to temperatures that would melt lead, incredibly acidic, and saturated with heavy metals leached from the bleeding rock. In this hellscape, traditional biology is impossible. Proteins denature, DNA unravels, and soft tissue dissolves into sludge. Yet nature, in its infinite stubbornness, has found a way. But to survive here, life had to abandon the very concept of being organic. It had to become something harder, something colder, something nearly indistinguishable from the rock itself. Welcome to the crystal forests. These are not trees made of wood and cellulose. They are towering, jagged structures built from silica, iron sulfide, and crystallized salts. They grow from the superheated vents, spiraling upwards like twisted glass cathedrals in the crushing dark. They are life, but life that has armored itself in the very minerals that make this place so deadly. The crystal forests are chemotrophic, feeding not on light or flesh, but on the chemical violence of the vents. They absorb the lethal cocktail of sulfur and heavy metals, processing it through a metabolism that is more like a geological reaction than a biological one. As they grow, they deposit layers of mineral armor, creating a skeleton of glass and metal that protects their fragile internal chemistry from the boiling acid outside. They are brittle, sharp, and utterly alien. If you were to touch one, it wouldn't feel like a plant. It would feel like grabbing a handful of razor blades frozen in liquid nitrogen, burning and slicing your skin simultaneously. But the most unsettling thing about these forests is not their appearance. It is their sound. The crystal forests hum. It's a low, resonant frequency, a vibration that you feel in your bones rather than hear with your ears. This isn't a communication signal. It's the sound of their metabolism. As they process the high-energy radiation and chemical compounds from the vents, the lattice structures of their bodies vibrate, creating a constant, mournful song that echoes through the deep trenches. It is the song of a planet grinding its teeth, a geological dirge for the world above. In the pitch blackness, these forests glow with a faint, ghostly luminescence. This isn't the friendly blue-green of plankton. It's a harsh, radioactive violet, a byproduct of the heavy metals being processed within their crystalline veins. Imagine walking through a forest of glowing glass shards, towering 10 meters high, pulsing with a sickly purple light. The ground beneath your feet is not sand, but a crust of solidified metal. The water around you boils and hisses. It is a landscape of terrible, lethal beauty, a garden grown in the heart of a volcano. This environment is so extreme that it has become an evolutionary dead end for everything else. No fish, no crab, no worm can enter the crystal forest and survive. It is a fortress of solitude, inhabited only by these mineral giants. They are the ultimate survivors, proof that life can endure even when the planet turns against it. But their survival has come at a cost. They have ceased to be soft, pliable, or recognizable as life. They have become monuments to their own endurance, frozen in a permanent, crystalline struggle against the elements. For millions of years, these forests will grow, undisturbed in the dark, silently witnessing the tectonic shifts of a dying world. They are the final frontier of adaptation, the point where biology merges with geology. But while the deeps have turned into a silent, crystal wasteland, the shallower waters are experiencing a very different kind of horror. Up there, where the water is cooler but just as desperate, life isn't hardening into stone. It's melting together. In the struggle for the few remaining scraps of habitable space, the lines between individual species are beginning to blur. The isolation of the crystal forest stands in stark contrast to the chaotic, crowded desperation of the remaining habitable zones. As the dead zones expand and the toxic blooms suffocate the surface, the surviving marine life is being pushed into smaller and smaller pockets of existence. It is a pressure cooker of evolution, forcing species into proximity and competition unlike anything seen before. In these shrinking oases, the drive to survive is overriding the biological barriers that separate one creature from another. The age of individuality is ending. The age of the hive is beginning. While the deep trenches have fallen into a crystalline silence, the remaining habitable zones of the ocean are screaming. In the few pockets of water where oxygen still lingers and the temperature hasn't reached boiling point, life is engaged in a desperate, claustrophobic brawl for survival. This is no longer an ecosystem of balance. It is a biological mosh pit. And in this chaos, desperate times have called for desperate measures. The most terrifying development isn't a new predator or a toxic plant, but a monstrous alliance between two ancient rivals. The corals and the algae, once locked in a delicate dance of mutualism, have fused into something far darker, the coral cancer. In the old world, coral reefs were the cities of the sea, orderly structures built over millennia. But the coral cancer is not a reef. It is a tumor. It begins when desperate coral polyps, starving and bleaching in the hot water, engulf a species of aggressive, slime-producing algae. Instead of digesting it or farming it, the two organisms merge on a cellular level. The result is a biological juggernaut. The coral provides the hard, stinging skeleton, a fortress of calcium carbonate and venom. The algae provides the fuel, photosynthesizing frantically in the murky water and producing a thick, protective mucus that shields the colony from disease and predators. The growth rate of this superorganism is terrifying. Unshackled from the slow, methodical deposition of limestone, the coral cancer expands like a fungal infection. It doesn't build up. It grows out, flowing over the seafloor in a relentless, pulsating wave. It consumes everything in its path. Other sponges, slow-moving starfish, even dormant clams are overgrown and suffocated within days. It is a landscape of biological assimilation, a Borg-like collective that tolerates no competition. To look at it is to see a landscape of lumpy, misshapen flesh, varying in color from bruised purple to gangrenous green, throbbing with a collective heartbeat. The most haunting aspect of the coral cancer is where it chooses to grow. It thrives on hard surfaces, and in the Anthropocene ocean, the most abundant hard surfaces are the ruins of humanity. Imagine a sunken coastal city, its skyscrapers and streets submerged by rising tides. Now imagine that city swallowed by the cancer. It creeps up the sides of buildings, encrusts the rusted skeletons of automobiles, and fills the empty windows of drowned apartments. It erases the sharp angles of human architecture, replacing them with soft, bulging organic curves. It is the ocean digesting our history, sealing our legacy inside a living tomb. Divers exploring these zones, if any dared to, would find themselves in a sticky, stinging labyrinth. The water around the coral cancer is thick with shed mucus and stinging cells drifting in the current. Touching the walls of this biological maze would result in chemical burns and immediate paralysis of the skin. But the horror goes deeper. The colony is hungry. It doesn't just rely on the sun. Millions of tiny, stinging tentacles carpet its surface, snagging any organic particulate that drifts by. It is a wall of millions of tiny mouths, all feeding the same insatiable belly. This is symbiosis gone wrong, a biological marriage born of panic and sealed in greed. It represents the end of biodiversity in the shallows. Where there was once a kaleidoscope of species, there is now only the cancer. It creates a monoculture of slime and stone, a dominant hegemony that chokes out all other forms of life. It is the ultimate survivor of the shallow seas, a king ruling over a kingdom of one. But as powerful as the coral cancer is, it is still just a localized reaction, a frantic attempt to hold on to the past. Far away in the open ocean, something else has been growing. Something that doesn't need to cling to the ruins of the past, but is ready to define the future. The coral cancer is a localized infection, but out in the deep blue, or rather the deep purple, a new ruler has ascended. It is not a scavenger, not a hunter, not a tumor. It is a titan, a life form so massive, so efficient, and so completely adapted to this new Earth that it makes everything else look like a biological draft. We have seen the ocean die, and we have seen it twitch in the throes of a nightmare rebirth. We have witnessed the rise of the slime, the hunger of the kelp, the crystallization of the deep, and the cancerous fusion of the shallows. But evolution never stops, pushes forward, relentlessly, until it finds a stable solution. And now, millions of years after the first silent alarm rang out, the ocean has found its new equilibrium. The chaotic struggle is over. The age of monsters is ending. The age of the Leviathan is about to begin. Time is the ultimate architect, and given enough of it, even the most chaotic blueprints can be turned into a stable structure. Flash forward 5 million years. The human race is a fossilized memory, a thin layer of plastic and radioactive isotopes in the geological strata. The screaming chaos of the transition era, the toxic blooms, the crystal forests, the cancerous reefs, has quieted. The planet has found a new equilibrium, but it is not the blue marble we once knew. The ocean that wraps around this future Earth is a deep, rich purple, stained by the dominance of retinal-based life forms that have replaced chlorophyll as the primary engine of photosynthesis. It is a world that feels older, heavier, and utterly indifferent to the ghosts of the past. In this purple ocean, the tiny, frantic struggles of the past have given way to a new era of giants. Evolution has favored size and stability over speed, and the undisputed ruler of this new world is not a whale, or a shark, or a squid. It is a plant. Meet the Leviathan lily. It is a floating superorganism so vast that early human cartographers, had they existed, would have mistaken it for an island. A single specimen can span 20 kilometers across, a floating continent of thick, leathery flesh that undulates with the slow heave of the purple swells. The Leviathan lily is not merely a plant. It is a biological city-state. Its upper surface is a rugged landscape of dark, solar-absorbing tissue, pockmarked with massive gas bladders that keep the titan afloat. These bladders are large enough to hold a cathedral, filled with hydrogen produced by the plant's metabolic processes. But the true scale of the Leviathan lies beneath the waves. Its root system is a terrifying miracle of engineering, dragging thousands of meters down into the abyss like the tentacles of a planet-sized jellyfish. These roots are not just anchors. They are active dredges, scraping the ocean floor for the nutrients that the surface waters lack.